a discussion about policy issues related to the manufacturing of consumer electronics with Gary Shapiro, president of the Consumer Electronics Association.
Well, this week on the Communicators, Gary Shapiro is our guest. He is the president and CEO of the Consumer Electronics Association, a trade industry group based here in Washington. Mr. Shapiro, thank you for joining us for the Communicators.
It's an honor to be here.
What is the CEA and who are your members?
We are a nonprofit trade association of over 2,200 different companies in the United States consumer electronics industry. It's from the smallest loudspeaker manufacturer making something in the garage to the largest like Microsoft or Sony or Apple. And in between there's retailers and others, but every one of these companies employs Americans in the business of consumer electronics.
But what kind of products do you make?
Everything that you would use in your home. The average American family owns about 25 different consumer electronics products, from the computer to the television to your alarm clock to your car stereo, nav device, MP3 player. These are the products which are driving the digital revolution, and Americans love them.
Part of your mission statement is that you lobby Congress, or you talk to Congress about issues. Right now, what are the issues that the CEA is raising with Congress?
There are a few big ones. Certainly, free trade is important to our industry. It's something which our economy has grown on. Our industry has grown and our economy has grown, and this industry is leading the economy, and it's relied upon the fact that we trade freely around the world. Sometimes the U.S. is the innovator and the exporter, sometimes we're the importer. But in any case, it's the people that have access to this technology which are creating new services like Google and Amazon, eBay, E-Trade, and others, and internet providers, and that's why we believe intensely in free trade. Now, obviously, momentum is shifting against us. You could see that in the presidential campaign. But there are these free trade agreements before Congress. We're hopeful that Congress will approve the one that's up right now, the Colombia free trade, and then move on to Korea. Every free trade agreement means that while we're letting imports in here at almost zero tariffs, that opens us for exports to the other country. And that's the case with Colombia, that's the case with Korea. The differentials are huge. So what these do, and our government, whether it was Republican or Democrats in charge, have always negotiated pretty strongly to make sure we have access to other markets. And that's important to us.
What, besides free trade, what else are you talking to Congress about?
We're talking about environment. We'd like to see a national recycling standard. We're talking about the digital television transition, and we're talking, of course, about the balance between the rights of intellectual property owners and, of course, the rights to innovate and for consumers to use that content in ways which make sense.
Let's start with intellectual property then. What is your position?
We believe that it's important that we protect the rights of patent owners, trademark owners, copyright owners. But at the same time, that protection has to have a balance with the rights of people who use those products. That's why the patent lasts less than 20 years. Well, today a copyright is over 100 years. It's very long. It's been increased 14 times in the last 40 years. The penalties for copyright infringement have gone up dramatically. So if you download a song that you're not supposed to, it's a higher penalty than if you actually stole the CD out of a store, and you can go to jail for that. These are the kind of things which have gotten out of balance, and what we're saying is let's bring balance back to the copyright laws. You know, almost 20,000 kids have been sued by the Recording Industry Association of America. That's destroyed their lives, destroyed their finances, and it's gotten out of kilter. And what we're saying, consumers do have a right. If you've lawfully acquired something, you have a right to transform it, to move it around your house, to play it, to bring it with you, to move it into your car. You don't have the right to sell it. You don't have the right to make money off it. But you do have some rights. And right now our concern is that the copyright lobby is so huge in Washington. There's so many lobbyists. There's so much money going to Congress that the rights of consumers and, frankly, the rights of the innovators in the technology industry are not being listened to. And the balance has gotten out of kilter. So it's important for us to bring back that balance.
So the DVD makers and the iPod makers of the world want to be able to allow people on an individual basis to download and copy things?
What we want to be able to do is understand what the law is and understand that we have the right to innovate. And if the law is not clear, we shouldn't be shut down. There's a case right now against XM Radio. XM is a national satellite provider. They've developed this little recording device which, if you subscribe, you can record a limited amount of time your XM music. They pay a royalty to the copyright owners for making that device, and you cannot send that music out over the internet. It stays on the device. They have been sued. If they lose that lawsuit,
who sued them?
The music industry. If they lose that lawsuit, the penalties are the number of songs in XM's inventory, which is a couple of 100,000, times $125,000 per song, times the number of devices. Well, that's better than the GNP of most countries in the world. So if they lose that lawsuit, they are out of business. So what we're seeing is, because the penalties are so high, we're seeing that large companies do not want to introduce cutting-edge products, and we're seeing small companies are being sued out of business. We're seeing venture capitalists saying, wow, there's a copyright risk there, we don't want to fund you. So all these great things that could happen are not. The fact is it's been strange. You know, the VCR 25 years ago was held to be an illegal product. Now, the Supreme Court reversed that by one vote, but imagine if it had gone the other way. There was proposals actually to shut down the internet because you're often moving around copyrighted works. Anything you do originally is copyrighted under the law. So if you could stop someone from sending that around electronically, then you're shutting down everything. And what we're saying is bring back balance to the copyright laws.
Are there bills in Congress currently dealing, or committees in Congress currently dealing with the copyright issue, the intellectual property issue?
Yes, there is legislation in Congress introduced by Congressman Rick Boucher, H.R. 1201, and what that does, it says that there are certain things which have already been approved by those powers that be in copyright which should be clearly allowed. And it also says that the damages, if you introduce a new product, you're innovative and you're cutting edge and you don't know if it's legal or not, the damages shall only be the actual harm to the copyright owner, not this billions or trillions of dollars which are damaged, which are squelching innovation. You know, it's these type of innovations, whether it's the TiVo, the personal video recorder, the MP3 player, the VCR, the Sling Media, all these other great recording technologies which allow you to manage your content in time, in place, and just get your favorite songs together or mash them up. These are the products which are transforming the economy. They're transforming the content world. But they're taking the power away from a few big movie companies, a few big record companies, and they're shifting it to the people. And that's the transformation that's occurring. That's what YouTube is about. That's what all these new services are about. And it's very scary to those very big content companies. But the fact is, by allowing that type of shift and control to people, you're creating new businesses, new opportunities. But of course, I understand you have to protect those existing copyright owners with a big investment. But the laws are so strong in their favor now, they have to be rebalanced.
Gary Shapiro, you recently spoke to the Detroit Economic Club. You went to Detroit and called for free trade, and specifically you named Ron Gettelfinger, president of the UAW, as somebody who is standing in the way of innovation and economic success in this country.
Well, the truth is, I have a home in Detroit, and I see it's a beautiful area. There are literally there's a lot of unemployment there. There's a lot of houses in foreclosure, a lot of real estate, commercial for sale, factories are empty, warehouses are empty, and it breaks my heart. I also have a home in D.C. My wife and I ran the same ad on Craigslist to get help, and we had one response in D.C. from an unqualified person. In Detroit, we were overwhelmed with responses from people who had been laid off, from highly qualified people who took early retirement, or other people who just wanted to work. They wanted to get out of the house. Phenomenal workforce in Detroit. It's a great place, but it's hurting right now. And when I see the challenges, the Detroit's political leaders and union leaders are leading the charge in the United States to close our borders off from competition. They are the protectionists, and the message the rest of the country is getting is Detroit can't compete. But the fact is, Detroit's producing some great cars right now from a quality point of view, from a price point of view, because of the value of the dollar. They're right there and they're competitive. But I think, you know, Americans have to look to Detroit as competitive with the rest of the world. So my message is don't shut off the borders. Don't say you can't compete. Go out there and say, bring your best on. We could compete with you. And I think Americans will respond to Detroit's products.
At the same time, I think maybe to play devil's advocate, Mr. Gettelfinger and others are saying, let's manufacture these products here at home. You know, let's not outsource them to China. Let's support our own nation. And a lot of consumer electronics, the majority, are made outside of our borders.
Well, the truth is we employ millions of Americans in our 2,200 companies here in the United States. But you want to just talk about automobiles for a second. Automobiles. In Korea, there's an 8% tax on cars that we export to Korea, a tariff or a tax. Coming in here, it's about 2%. That's an imbalance that the United States has corrected, and it's through this free trade agreement. It should not be opposed by Detroit. In terms of where the manufacturing occurs, basic economics is you manufacture things where it's best. We haven't lost jobs to Mexico and Canada. Mexico has lost jobs to China. The manufacturing of a lot of assembly work and things like that has shifted from other countries, it's long gone from the United States. This is work which is very repetitive, dull work. I think what we should be going for as a country is highly creative jobs, which require you to use your brain, Americans are so creative, they're so smart, and that's why we have companies like Microsoft and Google and Yahoo and all these great internet companies and Apple and others, because we're innovating. We're the best marketers in the world. We have a great marketplace here, and we're always pushing the envelope. And our national strategy and our national policy should be, how can we take that leverage, this great American mind, and make it the best? How can we attract the best and the brightest continuous to the U.S.? How can we always be cutting edge? I don't think we should be getting these jobs where you do the same thing, punch the same circuits or do something, 50 times a minute and for hours on end. Americans don't want those jobs. They want to deal with people. They want to deal with ideas. They don't want to sit in a factory and do the same thing over and over again.
How is it that the Colombian Free Trade Agreement that's currently being debated in Congress, why is it that the Consumer Electronics Association is in favor of that agreement?
Well, we're in favor of it because we have significant exports from the United States to Colombia. We would like to see the tariff reduced so we can have more. We're also in favor because that agreement, this administration, working with the Democratic Congress, has set a precedent with a prior agreement, with Panama and the Peru agreement, which basically says, here's what you can do. What you do is get that free trade both ways, but also protect workers, protect the environment, export some of our ideals, and they're good, strong agreements by all accounts. These are good, strong agreements in terms of export, free trade, but also protecting the environment and protecting workers, opposing child labor, things like that. And, we believe in the concept of free trade. If you are trading with a country, you are not fighting with that country. And that's why we, as an industry, are aggressively free trade. And that's why we even have gone to China. We've gone to Dubai in the Mideast. And we've created trade shows there to promote the concept of people and companies trading around the world. We've also gone there, frankly, to China and to Dubai as an organization producing a trade show because it's more and more difficult for people to come to our trade show in Las Vegas. We run the largest event in the United States. It's the Consumer Electronics Show every January in Las Vegas. We get 140,000 people, including 25,000 people from abroad. We also get about 4,000 media, more than any other event in the United States, including the Super Bowl. More media come. But we're finding increasingly it's difficult for those people to come to the United States because we've made it difficult for people to come and do business in the United States. And we have to change that as a national strategy.
From a CEA point of view, what products do we export to Colombia, or to China, or to Korea?
Oh, well, there's a huge array of telecommunications products, telephones, IT products, computers, loudspeakers, even some televisions. We do all sorts of things here. We add a lot of value to products in the United States. We have all sorts of sophisticated manufacturing. Now, a lot of the most basic stuff is done in Mexico or it's done in Asia or elsewhere, but we add value to those products, and we certainly do a lot in the software area. And that's why, our companies like Microsoft and others are so much behind this. And whether it's a Google or a Yahoo, they're all members of ours, and they understand that, our goal as a country is to focus on these services that are connected to technology. And in telecommunications, IT, it's all related. How does a consumer get that broadband service? How do they get C-SPAN? Well, they can get it from Verizon Fios, they can get it from satellite, they can get it, well, they can't get it over the air with C-SPAN necessarily, but it is a cable service. But the fact is that you need a device to be able to see that product. These are the tools of democracy. These are the tools of the First Amendment. Great story this week in the New York Times about how in Cuba, democracy has a chance because people are using these consumer electronics products, telephones and televisions and others, to communicate with each other about what's going on. And there's a little bit of mini rebellion going on there because democracy will prevail as long as the First Amendment is out there and as long as people could receive the message with a range of devices or with newspapers.
New administration coming in next year. The economy is slowing. People tend to circle the wagons when that happens. Trade is one of the big issues being discussed, especially on the Democratic side. How do you promote free trade when all those factors are against you?
Well, first of all, the economy is slowing. The bright spot, frankly, is consumer electronics. People are still going out and buying the products. They definitely want to get new televisions for this HD TV transition. But in terms of shifting administration, no matter what administration comes in, they'll have to deal with the reality that free trade drives our economy. There's definitely a lot of rhetoric right now. I don't simply understand this discussion about NAFTA being bad because it's been great for us, it's been great for our neighbors, and certainly we've had a challenge as a country in terms of our international perception. I don't think the way to improve that perception is to abrogate or rescind an agreement that's working with our two best friends. And I think we're sending a terrible message out to the world now by saying NAFTA doesn't make sense. And I think the concept of free trade has created 25 million new jobs in the last 15 years. We've lost 3 million manufacturing jobs admittedly, but we've created millions and millions more. Why? Because of free trade, because of new technology, because the U.S. is leading the world in the deployment of these two new technologies in terms of new internet services. You don't hear about Google and Yahoo and Microsoft and Apple and Texas Instruments and Intel and Qualcomm. You don't hear about these companies being headquartered in other countries. They're headquartered in our country, in the United States, and they're members of ours, and they're leading the world. Thanks to free trade, thanks to innovation, and thanks to the strong economy, and whether it's the Democrats or Republicans in charge, they have been and should continue in the future to support innovation and an economy which encourages innovation.
Gary Shapiro, you also mentioned digital TV and the transition, which is due February 2009. What role does CEA play? Do your companies manufacture the boxes that are going to be necessary?
I've worked on the transition to digital television for the last 15 or 20 years, and this is a huge change. There's no analogy. This isn't like going from black and white to color. It's not even like going from radio to television. It's more like going from the horse and buggy to the car. We have this system that we've used for years with television, which is a great system, and it's called analog. But you know what? We could get so much more information and use spectrum so much more efficiently by shifting to digital. And our government, in a bipartisan way, has said that in February 2009, we are turning off all the big analog stations and they are shifting to digital. And that means consumers have to be aware. Now, the government's been very generous. They say every American home, no matter how much money you have, you can get two $40 coupons to buy a little box that will keep your existing TV set working. Now, look, the fact is that 90% of Americans' homes have cable, satellite, or fiber to the home now. They don't need these boxes unless they want to keep TVs that aren't hooked up. But for the 10% of American homes that get only a free over-the-air broadcast signal, they have to be aware of this. And our job, working with cable, working with satellite, and broadcasters and consumer groups and the ARPs, to make sure that every American, less than a year from now, knows that what's happening. They know what their options are. They know how they can continue to get the signal, whether they go use that coupon and they go to the government website and get it sent to their home, or they go out and buy a new TV set, or they hook up with cable, or they hook up with satellite. And that's our objective, and I think we're going to do a great job at it. I've never seen such a cross-industry effort. The PSAs are running on cable, they're running on broadcast. We're out there alerting people, and the level of knowledge that consumers have is growing exponentially.
Is the government prepared for the transition in February 2009?
Absolutely. I think the government has done a phenomenal job. We have the best system in the world. You know, the Japanese, they went into digital television. They went to what they called high-definition television. They didn't believe in digital at that point. They put out an analog thing. They had to recall all the TV sets, and now they're trying to play catch-up. Europe said, you know what, Europeans don't really care about a good signal. They went to a halfway system, and they had to play catch-up now. You know, digital television is digital. It's like perfect, but there's a higher level of digital called high definition. High definition is a screen that's wider. It's called a 16:9 ratio. It has digital Dolby surround sound, and it has lots of lines. It's called, not to confuse, but it's 1080 or 720 number of lines. There's a lower version of, which really isn't very selling well, just called pure plain digital, and it's a little less expensive, but you can get a great HD TV set that, you know, for what a color TV set of the same size has cost 5 years ago. So basically, the American public now will buy about 30 million of these sets this year. They bought about that last year, and they're buying them up very quickly. Over half Americans have already bought their digital TV set. And we expect by the time the transition comes, most Americans will, or they will have cable or satellite or get one of these government boxes, and the government has done a great job. They are ready.
If somebody owns a 10, 20-year-old TV and they don't have the money to buy a new one or to have cable, etc., will they be able to watch TV after February 2009? And
that's the question the government's done a great job on. What they've said is, yes, you can, as a family, get two $40 coupons. You can go to either on Amazon.com or something, or you can go to your local retailer, and there's, you know, tens of thousands of retailers participating. You can go there, take your $40 coupon, and you could buy a little box, hook it in very easily. Now, that box could cost as little as $44, so maybe it's a $4 cost to the average consumer, or it could cost more if you want some bells and whistles. And what they could do is they could plug it in. It's very easy to plug it in. We have a 9-minute instructional video on how to do it. There's all sorts of websites and others helping people. Certainly there's a lot of local organizations who will be helping people install those boxes. But we want to make sure that everyone knows in the next 11 months what their options are. So no American is being left behind in this one. And certainly there's some anxiety, there's a little concern, but we have to put this in context. Last year, 2 million American homes went into foreclosure. I guarantee you that a lot fewer than 2 million Americans will not know about this DTV transition. And what they'll do is, if they don't know about it, they'll turn their TV side on in February 2009, and it won't work. Well, they'll turn on the radio, they'll turn on the newspaper, they'll call their local officials, and they'll find out within a few hours they will have that box in their home installed, and everything will be fine.
The Community Broadcasters Association, rural, small television, low wattage or low frequency group, says that if the FCC does not require the DTV converter boxes to comply with the All-Channel Receiver Act, it will be cutting off access to a vast majority of the TV transmitters in the nation, which primarily serve rural audiences, the elderly, and minorities.
Well, that's quite a claim. I mean, this group, I didn't even know who they were until a few months ago. They serve fewer than 1% of the American public. And what we are asking them to do is let their consumers know about what their options are. They can get one of these boxes that will serve them and carry that out. There are boxes on the market which serve their needs, and they have an obligation to join the crowd and do this public education campaign. If they don't want to do that, they can simply switch to digital, as all the other broadcasters are doing. But what they were doing just a few months ago is they were going and saying, we want cable to carry our signals for free. Now they've switched their tactic and they're running this campaign, which is they're trying to scare people. But they were absent for years. But they have different options now. And certainly they raise some legitimate concerns that they don't have a requirement to switch over the way every other broadcaster does. But there are other options out there, and I think they have an obligation, though, as everyone does at this point, to help inform consumers what their options are in this great national transition, which, as I say, should be kept in context. This isn't people losing their homes. This is people losing television service for a day or two until they figure out what their options are.
Gary Shapiro, what percentage of electronics are made in China?
You know, that's a great question. I'm not sure the answer to that. A large percentage of lower-end products are made in Asia, whether it's in China or in Korea or in Taiwan or Hong Kong or Malaysia or Singapore. But certainly a lot of the upper-level work is done around the world, whether it's in Europe or the U.S. There's a lot right on the border in Mexico in terms of TV set production. There's a lot of things that are made in the U.S. If you look at the loudspeakers, for example, that are made, the best ones, there's a couple hundred companies in the United States exporting around the world. We have a great reputation here. There are TV sets made in the United States as well. But the fact is, millions of Americans are employed in the manufacture, in the distribution, the retail, and then you take all the Americans that are employed in the service, the new technologies, the new products. And what these electronics are also doing is creating new opportunities for the content industry. They're creating opportunities for telework, for telemedicine, for people to create up new businesses out of their home. It's been absolutely phenomenal, this digital revolution we're living in today. And I feel fortunate to be part of it, because what we're essentially doing is we are driving this economy. We are living through a revolution. Now, when you're in a revolution, you don't feel any different, but the fact is, the generations from now, this era in time is going to be measured by the technological change, not by the politics. And these huge shifts in technology are transforming the world. It's allowing the poorest American to have access to what the richest American couldn't have had access to 20 years ago. And as long as we get every American hooked up to the internet and these technologies, I think we've done our job.
When you travel to Asia, it seems to me that the electronics are much more advanced over there than we see in our markets here. Am I perceiving that incorrectly? The telephones, some of the computers, etc.
Well, I think in the wireless area, it's fair to say that there's been more development. In fact, even in some developing countries, they didn't have to put all these landlines and lines around, and it's quicker to just go to a wireless technology. So a lot of developing countries, they have wireless, but they've never had wired. And certainly in terms of some of the telephone transmittal technologies and the usage of them for the internet, Japan and other countries are a little bit ahead of the United States. But we're ahead in other ways. We're ahead in broadband use in the office. We're ahead in fiber deployment. We're ahead in terms of our ability to create new services. We are the world leader in creating services for the internet by far. Everyone is modeling up, and we're exporting this. Google is an exporter. Yahoo, eBay, Amazon. They are exporting their business models everywhere.
But again, why the difference in the development of wireless technology then?
Well, the difference in the development of wireless technology is it's very cheap to just give someone a cell phone and create some cell towers. It's much more expensive to put up lines and lines and lines of cable. Cabling and telephone lines are very expensive to put into rural areas. The advantage of a broadcast or wireless signal, it doesn't require a wire. Same thing with satellite, doesn't require a wire. So it's much more efficient to reach large groups of people with wireless technologies.
Mr. Shapiro, you were on the Communicators a year or two back. At that point, we didn't really talk about recycling and environmentalism, but now it's becoming more of a front-page issue, especially with a lot of the electronic equipment that's being outdated every 6 months, computer terminals, et cetera, et cetera. What is happening to these millions and millions of units?
Well, you're right. Environmentalism has certainly changed a lot just in the last several months. There's two big issues in environment for us. One is recycling, and the other is usage of energy. And I can't even say one's more important than the other. Because we're selling so many products, and they are often become outdated, we have an obligation as an industry to recycle those products. What we want to do is to see a national recycling standard rather than have different approaches for each locality or state. And we're working with Congress to try to come up with something where if you sell something anywhere in the country, everyone understands how it's recycling. In the interim, what we've done is we've created a website, mygreenelectronics.org, where any citizen could go in, punch in where they live, and they could find out where the nearest recycling center is.
A lot of different laws across the country?
Well, increasingly, some they have. It's a crazy patchwork. We have some have a manufacturing doing the recycling, some have the retailers, some have the government, some have a combination. And what we're saying is, look, let's just do this the same way everywhere, and it's much more efficient from a distribution point of view. What's made things inexpensive to Americans is the fact that we have a national marketplace here, which allows companies like Walmart and Best Buy and others to sell things the same way, the same place, all the time, and that allows consumers to benefit from low prices. If you have to do something different in different areas, it raises prices for consumers because it raises the cost of the retailer or the manufacturer. The other big issue is how much energy is being used. We have an obligation as Americans to cut down on energy usage. And I think we have an obligation as industry to make sure that consumers buying our products know how much energy they're using. We also have an obligation to use these products wisely. So what we're doing is we're working with the United States government, the Environmental Protection Agency, and we have a program called Energy Star. And there's this little Energy Star logo on the most efficient products. These are standards developed by the government. And if your product is efficient, you can put it on there. Now, there's been 2 billion Energy Star products sold. 1.2 billion of those are consumer electronics products. And they're going to keep getting better. Because the fact is energy usage is an enemy anyhow. Energy creates heat, it creates inefficiencies, and there's always a drive in technology to get it smaller and more energy efficient. And that's why phones have gotten smaller, computers have gotten more efficient, televisions are certainly getting smaller and using less energy. And that's why we're doing what we can there. But that's definitely something we have to do as a nation.
Gary Shapiro is President and CEO of the Consumer Electronics Association. Thank you for being on the Communicators.
Thank you for having me.